Hey guys, Budcat7 here. Okay, it is Wednesday, October 3rd, 2018, and I want to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research channel here on YouTube. Thank you very much. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, and please watch my videos. I have some fantastic videos of some on-site, in-person research. I don't just show pictures or whatever, even though I love that myself, but please do check out my videos because I have some fantastic videos on my channel. And my channel is more or less like a research, academic type channel where I get all of this great stuff out of the research that I do in the library, online, and other places. So you'll be interested in the stuff that I have on my channel. Okay, so I'm in beautiful, picturesque Northport, Long Island, which during the 18th and 19th century was a whaling port. I guess before and after the mud flood, I guess this part of the world was not affected like other parts of the world over here, but it's a beautiful town, just a beautiful place and a beautiful day. So I hope you're going to enjoy it while I'm walking around telling you about what I found out for you. Okay, so as you know, if you're following along with my videos, I'm reading this book by C.W. Ceram called The First American, and this video has to do with elongated skulls. So how that relates to the stone walls is basically how, if you know about the elongated skulls, you probably know about Brian Foster and the research he's done down there in Paracas, Peru with the Paracas mummies. And he's actually done some DNA testing and some blood testing on these mummies because they actually still have flesh and hair, and they were able to do some of that. And, more or less, Brian Forster determined that these people were more or less not Homo sapiens, they're more like humanoids. And how that relates to the stone wall research here is many of the giant skeletons that were dug up around the northeast here had double rows of teeth. They're extremely huge, and as you know by going through my videos, you've been following along through my videos, you know that much of the research points that way. And my hypothesis is that the Native Americans from coast to coast, unlike the South American Indians and unlike the Inuit peoples to the north, were reported of being extremely tall, extremely large, bigger size, just much larger, human-type creatures that were, I believe, were humanoids. And this is the reason why the Native Americans are so tall, because they're hybrids. They bred with these peoples, and there's so much evidence that points to that, and that's my theory about it, We talk about that later on. So anyway, let me get to the juicy little tidbits that I found in this book of C.W. Ceram, the first American here, that have to do with elongated skulls. Apparently, you don't have to go down to Peru, Paracas, Peru, to find elongated skulls. They can be found right here in the U.S. And apparently, Brian Foster is not the first one to come across this information, his observation of them. And Brian Foster goes to great lengths on his videos to suggest to everybody that these people's physiology, their skeletal structure, their craniums are formed naturally. They're not due to headboarding or, cranial deformation, artificial cranial deformation. So, as I said, based on my research here in C.W. Ceram's book here, you can find that, and I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to read some juicy little tidbits for you as I walk around over here. I want you to see this beautiful little town over here. A lot of these houses have what they call widow's peaks, okay, where they're waiting for their men to come back from their whaling expeditions, and they had an approximate time of when the should we come back to port. And many of these houses have these sort of up on the high parts of the house, these widow's peaks, where these women would wait day after day after day for their men to come back. And hopefully I can show you a couple of those. They're very interesting architecture here that's specific to the whaling culture here in the Northeast. So anyway, let me grab the paperwork out of my pocket here. Maybe I can read it to you while I'm walking around over here. It's just beautiful, beautiful over here. Beautiful day, beautiful town. So let me read to you from some of the stuff, the juicy little tidbits that I found in this book that are just so very, very interesting. Okay, let me get the paperwork out here if I can. Alright, let's see here. Let's see here, the juicy stuff that I found in here. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Alright, well, this is like the 5th chapter or so in the book, page 140. And Ceram is talking about the Pueblo peoples. This has to do with the southwestern United States, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, where all these cliff ruins were found. These, apartment complex type structures where hundreds of people lived in these 5 and 6 and 7-story, pueblos there, built into the cliffs and whatnot. So just let me read these little tidbits for you. I don't want to do a real lengthy video, but let's see what we can do here. Okay, so this refers to the basket makers 1 to 3, which basically was before the time of Christ, according to their chronology, up until like 700 AD, etc., etc. So let me just read to you a little bit. Basket makers 1 to 3. The basket makers 1 appeared around or before the birth of Christ in the vicinity of the 4 corners. They are hypothetical. We can say nothing about them except that they laid the ground for everything that so clearly distinguished the basket makers 2. The latter are tribes whose life we can picture with some accuracy. They lived in caves or in extremely primitive pit houses where farmers who already planted corn and squash had long skulls, right there, okay? They had long skulls, reddish-brown skins, and thick, dark hair, okay? That's on page 140. So you have the long skulls there, okay? That you don't know much about these people, but apparently they know that they had long skulls, okay? On page 142 here, they talk about the Pueblo 1 people, and I have the chronology somewhere here in the paperwork here. The Pueblo 1 were from 700 AD to 900 AD. So, let me read to you. The same classification defines Pueblo 1 as follows. The first stage during which cranial deformation was practiced. Vessel neck corrugation are referring to pottery. That's often how the archaeologists date these people through their pottery. And village composed of rectangular rooms of true masonry were developed. So not mud bricks, but true masonry. That's very interesting. Okay, the custom of cranial deformation in rigid cradle boards suddenly arose, but no satisfactory explanation for this development has been suggested. So isn't that interesting? They don't know why these people just suddenly started strapping boards to their infants' heads and deforming the cranium there, but I think it has to do a lot with, what Brian Forster found out about the Paracas people down there who were really the royalty of the society. They were honoring those people. That's why cranial deformation arose. They were honoring their, their rulers, their ancestors, what they believed, were the people who gave them all kinds of stuff that contributed to their culture. So it's a very interesting little factoid there, and it's very interesting that they were doing true stonework and not just doing mud brick. Okay? All right, so let's go on here. Okay. On this page, it just says about how the Anasazi are referred to as the Old Ones. Okay? You can see my video on Petroglyph National Monument. In one of the videos, I go over PC stupidity, because out there, and this book was written in the late 60s, out there they referred to the Anasazi as ancient enemy, and they were, they were offended by that or whatever. So I don't know when the classification got changed or anything, but Apparently, at the time of this writing of this book, they called the Anasazi the old ones or the ancient ones. They did not call them ancient enemy. That seems to be a new PC thing that came about just recently, and I go over that in my video, but I just wanted to show you that in the book here, it says that the Anasazi were called the old ones, all right, and not ancient enemy. All right. All right, so later on, this is, I think, the next chapter is chapter 6 or so. Ceram is talking about an amateur, okay, and here we go. Look, guys, this is a Victorian. This is a Victorian with a widow's peak on it. You can see the railing up there. That's what they call a widow's peak. And very beautiful house, too. All right, so Ceram goes into this about this fella Weatherhill that lived in the late 1850s, late 1800s, late 19th century, and he was an amateur archaeologist. And let me read to you what he found there in his research, because you'll be very interested in this. Okay, so this is the late 1800s. That this guy Weatherhill, who they also referred to as Anasazi, as an old one, 2 feet below the lowest remains of the cliff dwellers, we have found remains of quite a different tribe. This difference is determined by the shape of the head, which is natural. Okay? It's natural. Long-headed or dolichocephalous. The cliff dwellers, as we find them, have a perpendicular flattening at the back of the head, making it artificially brachycephalous. So, this guy Weatherhill, back in the late 1800s, identified these skull deformations, one as being natural, and then the other, that he knew about, I guess, was artificial. So here you go. You don't have to look at Brian Foster's stuff. You don't have to go to South America. We have naturally occurring cone head, skeletal humanoids right here in the United States, guys. We don't have to go anywhere. We also have the cone head people here in the United States, according to this. According to the archaeology done in the late 1800s here. So, guys, Brian Foster goes through great lengths to try to convince everybody about this. And, I mean, he probably doesn't even know about this at all. And, here we go, just another affirmation. And it's probably the peoples who were living there did the same exact thing as the South American people did down there in Peru. They honored these people by, deforming their heads to be the same shape, etc., etc. They said, in this, they said they don't know why it occurred. Well, it seems pretty obvious why it occurred, so I just wanted to read that little tidbit for you over there. Okay, so here we are in this next chapter here, and this talks about, and this is very interesting too, because here we see an archaeologist of the time who had his own theories, his own research about things, and the stuff that he found out was very radical, and his fellow archaeologists just beat him up about it. He had many discussions with other archaeologists, and those archaeologists just beat the hell out of him about it because they didn't like what they were hearing. It wasn't fitting in with their current notion of what was supposed to be going on down there, the chronology, the people, etc., etc. So let me read this to you because I found this very, very interesting. Okay, he's talking about the Hohokam people and what that word stands for. Apparently, that stands for the vanished people. Isn't that interesting? The vanished people. Okay, these Hohokam stood out from the first as a very special and remarkable people. And in this chapter, we shall confine our attention to them, for synthesis demands not only compression but rigorous selection. The word Hohokam, a Pima Indian word for those who have vanished, seemed for a long while to be valid. Okay, so here's where they start beating up this guy, Harold S. Gladwin. In the early 20th century, he was a stockbroker from New York who did the amateur archaeological research. And I mean, again, in this C.F. Ceram book about the first American, these are where you're going to hear these stories. You're not going to hear it mainstream or whatever, because they beat the hell out of this guy. They made him revise his stuff like dozens of times, whatever, to sort of conform to what everybody's thought was. And that's how this stuff works. And this is the point that I was trying to make to Dr. Kenneth Fader on Coast to Coast when I called into the show, that, you know, Dr. Fader, whatever knowledge Dr. Fader has about anything is consensus. It's conjecture. It's preference is what it is. You know, the theories that the archaeologists and the anthropologists come up with is just consensus. Okay, they all get together and they agree on a theory. It's not proof. It's not fact. Okay, so for Dr. Fader to say to me, well, if you want to do this or that, prove, you know, that giants existed, the walls were, whatever. It's very sophomoric for Dr. Fader. He apparently doesn't understand anything about logic or philosophy or anything like that, and I do. I've been studying it for 40 years. Okay? You can't ask somebody to prove something based on whatever it is that you know. That's nothing more than consensus, agreed upon consensus about a hypothesis. Okay? It's just a preferred theory. That's all it is. There's other scientists and archaeologists who dissent, but their theories are not accepted because it's not part of the consensus. These are not facts. These are not proofs, okay? Theories are not facts. Theories are not proof. So it's basically whatever theory you prefer. And if somebody else comes up with another theory, it's not incumbent on them to show proof. All they have to do is convince other people that their theory is better than another theory, okay, which is not proof. The theory might be better, or one that you prefer. That's it. But to ask people to provide proof, I think, is a bit disingenuous by Dr. Fader over there. So they did the same thing to this Gladwin fella. They beat him up about what he found and all. But let me read it to you, because I don't want to make this video too long. Okay, so these Hohokam stood out from the first as very special and remarkable people, and in this chapter we divine attention to them for blah blah blah. Okay, so the Pima Indian word for those who have vanished seemed for a long while to be back. It was way back in 1927 that Harold S. Gladwin, guiding spirit and director of the Gila Pueblo Archaeological Foundation of Globe, Arizona, first came upon actual traces of this people. He then spent years locating thousands of prehistoric sites before he fixed on Snake Town, 28 miles south of Phoenix. Okay, that's where this is in Arizona, as the probable center of their culture. From the start, there was no lack of controversial discoveries. For example, Gladwin disagreed with Kidder, who I don't know, some other archaeologist, in his identification of the massive many-storied ruin of Casa Grande, which is in Arizona there, and as a Hohokam monument. However, in the course of his experimental trenchings, Gladwin came upon a mound, quote unquote, that was 10 feet high and 165 feet in diameter, in which he struck a solid and obviously worked block of stone. Isn't that interesting? Okay. At this point, he began to reconsider Kidder's view, but then he dug deeper and found that the prehistoric, quote-unquote, block was a, quote, a square block of concrete with an iron pipe embedded in it, which turned out to be a U.S. land office marker. Well, I'm sorry. I'm very, very dubious of that. I'm very dubious that this was a landmark. You're telling me that in sometime before 1927, okay, the U.S. Department of Interior Land Office put a marker there, and then they proceeded to, you know, employ hundreds of people to come and bury it 10 feet or deeper. He said he dug deeper or whatever it is, 165 feet in diameter to bury this landmarker, this office landmarker. This ridiculous. I'm sorry, but I'm surprised that Ceram even bought into this story here. I'm sorry. That sounds like such a bullshit story. I can't tell you. I mean, why would they do that? They put the landmarker there, and then somebody came along and buried it 10 feet in 165 feet diameter mound. And again, mounds out there in the Southwest over there, okay? It's not, you don't hear about, people talking about it. It's not generally accepted in the mainstream paradigm. But if you look into my videos at Petroglyph National Monument, I refer to mounds over there. Okay, so there are mounds over there, and I don't believe this. I mean, if they found a concrete something or rather, a block with a pipe in it, in this mound or whatever, guys, this is probably the traces of the advanced civilization that was here tens of thousands of years ago, and the Native Americans probably were venerating it, worshiping it, whatever it was, and, maybe they made the mound out of it or whatever, but I find it hard to believe that it was a land office marker. That sounds like a complete BS story, okay? And apparently this guy Gladwin, his fellow archaeologists and anthropologists just beat the crap out of this guy for anything that he came upon there to get him to conform. We're not going to be your friend anymore if you say that. And he was a weak guy, weak character, I guess, and he didn't say, well, say, whatever you want, I don't care, I'm sticking to my story, and, oh, you're going to be working at McDonald's, hey, come by for a hamburger sometime, okay, because I'm not changing my story, all right there, buddy. That's what he should have said, but, you know how it is. This guy was, just beat up by these people, and, he didn't have the kind of character to say, well, I don't give a shit what you say. This is what I found, and that's it. All right? So anyway, guys, I wanted to read those little tidbits out of there. You got elongated skull people. You got mounds down there in the Southwest. You have evidence of a past, advanced civilization down there. And you don't have to go to Peru, whether Brian Foster knows it or not. I mean, you have elongated skull people right here in the Americas, right here in the United States. You don't have to go anywhere else. And again, how this relates to the stone walls? Well, I think that these people are somehow related to the giant, double row teeth giants that they dug up here in the northeast United States. They're all part of the Atlantean civilization, or the previous civilization, whatever, the Hyperboreans or whatever it was, way back in time, that had advanced technology, etc., etc. And the reason why they were here in the Northeast is because they were extracting the resources here for Atlantis, okay? Atlantis was an island nation like Britain or Japan or any island nation. Where did they get their resources from? Well, not locally, that's for sure. So why should Atlantis be any different? And I think these double row teeth giants that were here in the Northeast here got caught out there, during the cataclysm that happened, 11,000 years ago or so, or who knows when, maybe more recently for all we know. And they got caught there, the gravity of the planet changed or whatever, and they could no longer survive. But meanwhile, they mated with the Native Americans, and created these hybrids. And that's why the Native Americans are so tall, coast to coast here in the United States. They're, the Inuit people to the north are short-statured. The people in South America are short-statured. But the Native Americans here, countless accounts of them being tall, with enormous weapons, etc. We find enormous weapons in all these burials and mounds and stuff. So anyway, guys, I just wanted to read to you that stuff. We're going to get into that other stuff about Atlantis and the giants and everything later on, about my theories and hypothesis about the Northeast here. We'll get into later videos. But I wanted to read that stuff from Ceram's book, because Ceram is telling stories about archaeology that you're not going to hear on the mainstream here. And this was just some juicy stuff in here about elongated skulls right here in the United States. Don't have to go to South America. You don't have to go to Peru. They're right here, guys, okay? So anyway, guys, Budcat7 signing out. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye now.